Alrighty, well, we can go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome NC native attorney Elizabeth Boyette to join us this Tech Tuesday. She's got over 10 and a half years of real estate, estate planning, and business representation, and she's now of counsel to Jackson Law. She's going to teach us a little bit more about the benefits of an LLC, asset protection, and strategies to minimize our annual burden, our tax annual burden. Alrighty, I'll go ahead and pass it over.
Hey guys, sorry, we're trying to get our audio figured out over here. Can you guys hear me okay? Will you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Yeah, good. Okay. We might have a little situation where you can hear me, I can't hear you great, but we're gonna get rolling for a little bit and we'll stop for questions that anyone has. It can be very, informal if you just want to type in the chat whenever something comes up, and we can also take questions at the end. So whatever works best for y'all. But thanks so much for having me. I've been with Jackson Law almost 9 years here. We're primarily a residential real estate firm, but I've actually built out a department called the transactional department. So what we do here is a lot of estate planning, business planning, probate, that kind of thing. We're usually helping a lot of small business owners, a lot of real estate agents, and just different folks who, need assistance with getting things set up the right way so that things don't fail on the back end, which is also somewhat of a pickle that we're working through sometimes. But what I want to talk to you about today is just what makes sense for small business owners generally. Something to think about too is that while I'm talking today, all of this is very general information and it doesn't always specifically apply to you. We're going to get into some just high level tax stuff and just always a reminder to try and reach out to your own resources. Schedule that complimentary consultation with our office or try and talk to your CPA so you can make sure you're getting the right advice for you specifically. But we'll get rolling and just talk about it, just kind of big picture, some things to be thinking about to make you just the strongest business owner possible. So first thing we're going to talk about is, we hear a lot about the differences between a limited liability company and a corporation. And what is the difference between those? Why do we pick one over the other sometimes? And what's really the best and most advantageous to you? So generally, we're recommending limited liability companies or LLCs to our small business owners because it's just a lot simpler for you. The differences are primarily in compliance, which means that, if we're creating an LLC, it's just easier to manage throughout the year. We're less likely to be pierced and have someone come in after our assets because we didn't set up our filings the right way and we didn't, each year take certain corporate minutes, keep meeting records, and this type of thing. So for an LLC, we have fewer filings and forms. We start the company up with articles of organization, and then each year we have to file what's called an annual report with the Secretary of State. So the startup and management costs are just quite a bit less with this type of entity structure. And we don't have to have a board of directors. We don't have to issue stock. We don't have to keep company minutes. None of that is really required, which is hugely advantageous. However, if you came to me and you were like, hey, I have this great new idea. I want to form a startup. I might go public one day. This is what I'm looking at. We always try and start small and try and figure out the best entity for you, keeping in mind those future goals. But if you're truly in that position, we might look at a corporation and, maybe hire someone in to come help you to figure out what this vision planning strategy looks like in the future. Because obviously we don't want to try and save a bunch of money at the front end and then not be able to achieve those goals later. However, we can eventually change your LLC into a corporation if we need to. So a lot of different options for you, but just be thinking, what is the simplest thing I can get away with for my small business? Because you don't want to spend all your time trying to worry about how do I stay in compliance? How do I get the right documents in place? And really, at the end of the day, we're thinking, why do we want to form an LLC? And there are a lot of advantages for setting up a company for yourself. And I would say the biggest two advantages are actually, we want to form an LLC for asset protection and for tax purposes. So, legal advantages of an LLC, we're trying to keep your personal assets separate from your business assets. So why this matters is because if we're, out and about, whether we're selling goods, service, whatever our occupation might be, we don't want to have some sort of accident or become liable to someone else, and they actually sue us and take everything that we own in our personal names. Whereas if we set up the LLC the right way and keep our business and personal assets separate, then ideally, if there's a claim against us, the creditor should primarily be going after our business finances. And it's not necessarily the case that they won't be able to go after you personally if you don't get the right legal counsel. But the idea here is set you up with the best lines of defense from the outset. Some of you too, you might have really highly regulated professions. It kind of depends on what you're doing. But if you have a board that's overseeing you, or you have to meet certain licensing requirements, that certainly means that you're going to be held to a higher standard as well. So really good to just keep business and personal assets separate, particularly if you operate a restaurant, if there's a slip and fall case, if you are selling real estate and you're worried that someone's going to, pull you into a lawsuit or something wasn't disclosed properly. So all those things to be thinking about. How do we keep our house separate and our personal bank account, our 401k, all of these types of things, so that we don't have to worry about that in the future. So how this really comes up is when I set up my LLC, I'm going to create a business bank account with, my bank of choice. And I'm going to show them, hey, here is my articles of organization. I'm a legitimate business, and I have an EIN with the IRS. So I have my own tax ID in the name of the company. And with this business bank account, maybe I've actually set up the ability to run a credit card for my expenses through it. So I'm actually not mixing, when I go to Target and buy stuff for my kids and myself, I'm not mixing that with like, oh, okay, now I'm practicing law and I'm running my, my expenses for paper and those types of things. So be thinking about that too, really keeping good records, good bookkeeping. How do we make sure that we're set up from the outset, so we're not mixing these things back and forth? And if you do make a mistake, just keeping a good paper trail where you clearly are reimbursing the business or yourself for whatever you've done. So I briefly touched on this earlier about piercing the veil. And what that means is if we do mix everything up and we start to throw in, all of our home expenses, and maybe we're just taking our checks each month and we're putting them into our personal account, and then we have a big mistake, maybe we harm someone, something's not going great, we get this claim filed against us. At that time, if everything's all mixed up, it's a lot easier for the creditor to come after us personally, because there's really no delineation between your business itself and you as the person. It's kind of all mixed up as, one entity. So we have this idea in mind, asset protection is huge. Whatever it is we're selling or doing, or, whatever service we're providing, we certainly don't want to make a mistake in that profession and someone be coming after us. So how do we get this set up the right way? So we actually form the articles of organization with the Secretary of State, and it has to have certain personal information like, name of the LLC, the addresses of the people who are signing the articles, the street address of the registered agent, and the LLC's principal office. How this matters for you guys is sometimes if you do it yourself or if you do it on LegalZoom, you can end up disclosing a lot of personal information that might not really need to be out there. And once we put it on public record, I can't really reverse that and get it off without filing a new LLC for you. So the things to think about with that are, if we have to have a registered office whose purpose is really to just be present, someone's there who can accept service process for your company, it might be best not to have that as your home address. If we have just a really small operation and we're not worried about it, and it's okay if your address and name are on public record, that's fine. But a lot of my clients prefer to use our law firm as the registered agent to accept that service of process. Eventually, there will need to be additional disclosures with the Secretary of State at a later date. But just thinking ahead, what is the least amount we can put on public record, so we're not trying to worry about taking it off later, particularly if we have a disgruntled client. Maybe we get a bad review, just things that we don't want someone being able to easily find us, and where our family lives, our neighborhood, and those types of things. And to that end, when we're getting your LLC started up, if we have an LLC where you and a business partner, or maybe several business associates, are going in together, we really should look at an operating agreement. And what that is a long contract, and it just outlines certain things about, what happens if one of the business partners dies, what happens if someone gets divorced, goes bankrupt, or what if they just can't live this lifestyle any longer, where they're a business owner and instead want to go be a W-2 employee somewhere else. They're trying to get out of this particular industry. So the operating agreement, as this long contract, it really outlines worst case scenarios. Sorry, my light goes off in my office. But it helps us figure out, in these worst case situations that no one anticipates or expects to happen, how do we contract around that so that there's a rule book and a set of terms that everyone follows along with, or if they don't follow along with them, at least we can go to litigation about what's in the terms of this long contract. So certainly think about that. I would say before you and any of your buddies or anybody even if it's a long-term business partner, even, it's never too late to put an operating agreement in place, just because we never think bad things are going to happen to us, but my job is also fixing on the back end when things have gone terribly wrong. It's a lot easier to resolve those issues if from the outset we've been able to put that good agreement in place. Something else to think about too, we're getting this company set up, and we're maybe having some meetings with the different business partners, and what are our goals, and how much money are we each paying into this venture as our capital contribution? What are we doing? So we also need to think about, do we presently own any real estate in this entity? Or is that part of our plan? And if it is part of the plan, it's generally more advantageous to hold that in a separate land holding LLC, just to have additional liability protection. At the end of the day, we're always going to tell you to talk to your tax folks about what makes the most sense for you in terms of operating company versus land holding company. But you could see the advantages of, if we're keeping the building that we are working out of, that our company also owns, in a separate company, then if something happens and maybe our operating company is sued, ideally they shouldn't be able to go after the land that's held over in this other company if we've continued to keep things separate between the companies. So really getting that good legal advice with a comprehensive structure at the outset is very important, because we can avoid a lot of conflict and issues down the road. And sometimes too, you might meet with the attorney at the outset and they'll say, hey, let's keep things simple. No need to spend a lot of money yet if we haven't actually purchased the building. But as you grow your company and your business, and maybe you decide, I don't want to pay rent forever, it might make sense to go ahead and, be paying down that mortgage instead, building some equity. Just things to think about too, how there are advantages to really forming that separate LLC itself. Another way this could be helpful too is, what if our business is really just, we're owning land to rent it out? Because if you think about it, we can have a lot of different businesses in our lives, right? So we can be operating this service industry based business, but maybe also we're owning a rental property in a separate LLC. So it really sky's the limit when we're thinking about how we want to structure this. But I think this example is going to give you a good idea of the asset protection that an LLC can provide you, particularly if you had the land inside of the company. So the example here is just thinking about, what if you buy a rental and you're primarily renting out to college students, and someone slips and falls and they go off a second floor balcony, they break their legs, and then they sue you and they say the balcony railing was unsafe. So the idea here is, if they name you personally in the lawsuit, they should have a lot less success going after you personally if everything has been separated out business and personal assets. So in the LLC, we have the property, we've run all the rental payments, we've set up the contract in the name of the LLC. So you get the idea here where if there is some sort of lawsuit against you, if we've kept the assets in the LLCs separate, along with the bookkeeping and running the expenses and all of that, then really we should have a lot of success in defending against having our personal own assets brought in to that litigation. And just further, thinking about how can this asset protection help me, and how can my LLC really be something that we can use lifelong, throughout the course of our, having a family. Maybe we continue to grow our company. Maybe we add on several other business partners and other companies. What does our lifetime trajectory look like? A lot of people ask me, well, can I just put everything inside of a trust instead of actually doing it in an LLC? And the thought here is really, trusts are really cool. It's also an entity in the sense that it's a legal contract and it can own real estate and it can actually hold your business interest in the LLC. We use it a lot for estate planning and to avoid probate when you die. But the self-settled trust that you create yourself, it does not provide asset protection. So what that means is basically, if I run up a huge credit card bill, whether it's in the name of my company or the name of myself, I can't just, hide behind this trust that I've created and expect not to be liable to that credit card company or, someone that I owe money to. The trust itself doesn't act as a shield that way for me while I'm alive. However, when I die, if I set it up the right way and I have good legal counsel, what happens is I can actually create asset protection for my kids or other third-party beneficiaries. So that can be really helpful if those people start to have gambling problems, drug addictions, things like that. And the reason why I bring this up is mainly because, so many people call in, why do I need an LLC? Can I just go with a trust for asset protection instead? Really, you can't do it during your lifetime, but it can be a really cool tool where, maybe we've created a bunch of different businesses, we have LLCs, maybe we have a corporation. What happens when we die? Thinking about that too, because that's part of a good business plan. And hopefully that's in our operating agreement with our business partners. But ideally, if we have our LLC actually titled in the name of a trust, or we have some other good comprehensive estate planning set up, then, we put our business partners in a better situation. We put our families in a better situation. And maybe we can avoid a lot of grief on the back end where potentially if we have a single member LLC and then our business bank account is frozen because nobody else has access or legal authority to get into that bank account. So be thinking about that too, just in terms of the asset protection. This is really good with other estate planning documents. It's not something I would use as the first line of defense for lifetime creditor claims. Now, so what we're going to get into here is a little bit of taxes. So we just had a good talk about, asset protection. How can the LLC help me to shield personal assets from, business activities and liability and what can go wrong in that sphere? So I would say if you're not concerned about the asset protection, maybe you have a really good commercial umbrella policy and you and your insurance agent have carefully reviewed your policy to make sure that you are totally covered. That's not the thing for you. I do think something that could be advantageous for a lot of small business owners is to think about the tax implications for forming an LLC and how that can be really helpful to you down the road. This is where I think I should give some more general language about, I'm not personally an accountant. I'm not a CPA. I'm not really trying to give you specific tax advice. I'm just trying to give you ideas of things that you can think about for good conversations to have with your CPA if it's right for you, at the time you're trying to use these tools. And really also when we're talking about this, I think a good mindset is, we're not trying to defraud the government. We're not trying to cheat on our taxes. The idea here is to do good planning throughout the year with a qualified professional to proactively reduce your income taxes. I have a lot of small business owners who don't do good tax planning, and what ends up happening, as you guys probably know, is you can get a huge tax bill at the end of the year if you weren't expecting, certain expenses just based on your income over time. So we're really trying to work with an accountant and calculate our tax savings and file a certain way to increase just the amount of stability you have and good planning throughout the year. I'll show you what I mean by this. So we are talking about forming an LLC, which is the business entity itself. But I can actually have an LLC and I can file a certain kind of tax status called an S-election. What this does is it allows me to take half of my income as a distribution and half of it as my self-employment income. So what we're thinking about here is, what is our net income? Have we talked to our CPA to make sure that this makes sense for us? Usually I've heard most CPAs say it's between $30,000 to $40,000 net income is when we should start looking at filing for an S-election with the IRS. You can only file for an S-election during certain times of year unless you work with your accountant to try and get it approved retroactively. I think there's a lot that goes into that, but it is something that your accountant will help you file. So again, thinking about, hey, we need that good tax advice to make sure that we are in the best situation possible for us. And maybe, here it says short-term versus long-term goals. So maybe that's not something that we're doing this year, but we're keeping an eye on our income to make sure that once we hit that threshold, we're not just leaving a ton of money on the table, that we could have been doing this proactive tax planning throughout the year. So generally, when it's just me, maybe, I don't know, I sell fruit on the side of the road and it's just Elizabeth Boyette out there. I'm selling my fruit. I get all this income that comes in. It's reported on my Schedule C. So I'm actually paying income taxes on all of my net income, and I'm paying self-employment taxes on all of my net income. So if you look at this pie chart here, you can see the self-employment tax. I'm paying up to 15.3% on my income. So that's high, especially if my fruit stand sales really start to skyrocket, right? So maybe there's something I can do. Maybe I've had the 30 to 40,000 net income on fruit sales this year, talked to my CPA, and we figured out, hey, it's probably a good time to file for the S-election. So that's the S corporation election, where we're actually asking the IRS to consider us still as an LLC, but we are filing as a different tax status filing. So what that lets me do is I can split the amount of money I'm getting net in half as salary and half as net income, which is a distribution I'm taking out of my business. So I'm paying income taxes on my salary, and I'm paying self-employment taxes only on that salaried portion, not so much on the income tax. So you can see how it's split here, half as a distribution, half as the actual salaried portion. This lets your CPA run payroll for you. So throughout the year, you're already paying on that particular half. So the other half should just be taken as a distribution to you as the business owner itself, not as the employee. So here's just a visual comparison for that, where, we have a S corporation versus a sole proprietorship. So the one screen where it says S Corp FICA at the top, this is the idea where I'm splitting in half my net profit for my distribution, and the other half is my salary. You can see there, I'm paying $6,120 for the self-employment taxes. So I'm netting $73,880. On the other side, this is just me selling the fruit on the side of the road. This is where I'm just the sole proprietor. I made $80,000 last year, but I didn't run half of it as payroll. So I'm not taking half as a salary. Then my self-employment taxes is the full $12,240. So I end up netting $68,696. Which here is the difference of $6,120, or a return on investment of 8%. So, you're just thinking to yourself, well, who wouldn't want to save that money on taxes? What can I do to make that happen for me? The answer there is really talk to your accountant and see if it makes sense for you and it's time to start filing that separate tax return that is for an S corporation. While you're still operating as an LLC, this is just how the IRS categorizes you as your business taxes. Other things we can start thinking about too are, we formed this LLC, we're doing a great job, we're keeping our business and personal assets separate, we have our business credit card, and we're able to start running expenses through there. Maybe our job significantly relies on marketing. Maybe we start going to business development groups like a BNI. Maybe we have a group of colleagues who like to get together for lunch. Maybe we actually go to festivals or open houses, or just getting our name out there and doing more advertising. So thinking about what types of things are 50% deductible. That's, when I take my friend to lunch, who we're talking about business and it qualifies as a business expense. The food for events like the open house that are open to the general public are 100% deductible, but entertainment is not deductible as of 2018. So this means if I'm giving out sports tickets or ballet tickets to a colleague and hoping they'll send me business, we can only deduct those up to $25 per person. But thinking about too, what are some things that we do already as small business owners, and how can we maybe meld some of those activities where we're actually able to take a deduction for them, but they still qualify as a legitimate expense. I guess all that to say is, a lot of us, now that we're older, we have a lot of friends who are professionals. Even for me, a lot of my kids' parents, they do stuff that could be helpful or could be potential sources of business. So just be thinking, if I'm going to this open house, or if I'm donating this, thing for charity, or how can I start using different aspects of my life to still organically network and grow my business and take those as legitimate deductions, under the advice of our CPA. Just good planning and trying to really run more things through as deduction. So all that to say, we obviously have to document this. It doesn't have to be bad. It doesn't have to be painful. And I think too, a lot of the times where people start really mixing business and personal assets separate is they don't want to do the bookkeeping and stay in compliance. But if we just go out to lunch, for me, maybe I take another attorney out to lunch and they do family law, and I really want them to send me some of their estate planning clients because they've divorced and they need to get their estate planning documents redone. I would just say, I took my friend to lunch. We see on the receipt how much it costs. We see the date. We can see at the top of the receipt which restaurant it was. And then I can just write, had lunch with so-and-so, discussed whatever, potentially hoping to grow this area of the practice, whatever you want to put. And what I actually do is I keep my physical receipts just kind of in a little area, but actually I'll upload all those to just Dropbox or somewhere that's safe to me so I can have them all stored electronically. So be thinking too, you guys, you work so hard at your different industries and you're really trying to grow your brands and build your business. It's really stressful if at the end of the year or come tax time, your CPA is asking for what your various deductions are and everything's a mess and you haven't done good bookkeeping. I think there's a lot to be said for actually paying for the services of a good bookkeeper to keep this stuff just organized for you, because a lot of the bookkeepers can go in QuickBooks for you and actually categorize your different expenditures according to the appropriate deduction category. So I can't say enough good things about paying for the advice of other professionals. Obviously you guys are asking other people to pay you for your services, your goods, whatever, trying to set yourselves apart. I think the same could be said for you should keep doing a good job at what you're doing to generate income and pay other good qualified professionals to help you keep this stuff organized. Because you could be leaving a lot of money on the table, and hopefully we are netting out where you're actually saving more money than you're spending on the qualified professionals who assisted you. Whether that's a bookkeeper or the accountant or the legal fees or, whatever the case may be. I think sometimes you can go broke saving money, and it's something where if you're investing in your business as a career over your lifetime, you're going to have to spend a little bit of money over time to be set up the right way for the future. Particularly as your business starts booming, that's not the time when you have a ton of customers or you're trying to help a lot of different people and you actually can't make the money because you're going in on the back end and trying to do the administrative compliance. Thinking about too, the standard deduction versus the mileage. The 2023 mileage rate is 65 cents per mile. That's the same deduction for everyone. It doesn't really matter what you drive. And some of you, you could be on the road quite a bit where you are spending so much time in the car. It really makes sense to start taking these deductions and reimbursing yourself from your business. And apps like Mile IQ, there's different apps that'll actually track where you're going. So Mile IQ, for example, will pop up and it'll ask you for each trip, was this business or personal, or, even was it healthcare related. So you can swipe back and forth. It starts to memorize your route. I know some people think that's creepy. We don't really want, a different app to know where we're going. But, at the end of the year, if you get a couple $100 to a couple thousand and you're able to write a check from your business to yourself and take that as a deduction, that's really helpful in reducing your overall taxable income. So be thinking about that. And I think too, something to consider is, when's a good time to sit down with my CPA and talk to my accountant about getting this good planning help? If you think about it, we just ended the extension for personal returns yesterday. Before that, we had the extension for business tax returns. So those generally happen mid-fall. Then we have our tax rejections at the end of the year. That's a really good time to sit down with your accountant and say, hey, what am I expected to owe this year? What are different ways I can fund other deductible accounts or expenses, or what can I do to reduce my tax liability for this calendar year? And then obviously your CPA is going to be super busy from January to April. So I think the summer can be a good time to plan too, or maybe the next couple months before we get into the holidays, start thinking about, hey, maybe I haven't done things exactly how I wanted to this year, but what can we do differently next year? And have that good planning conversation where, I made this much money this past year. This is what I'm expecting to make next year. How do I save that money? And, downloading Mile IQ, thinking about if we haven't formed a small business yet, maybe we want to do that January 1 of this, upcoming calendar year for 2024. So I think just if you've had struggles with your particular CPA, hey, I can't get in touch with them. They're not doing good planning. We're not able to have the conversation that we want to. It might just be that we need to focus on trying to talk to them at different times of year than crunch time. And I think this is where the good planning comes into play, where, if we're always retroactively trying to fix what we just did, maybe we can start thinking about it from a proactive approach instead. My last plug for, LLCs, eventually making enough money, we file for our S election. It's my understanding that generally, the IRS is targeting small businesses, sole proprietorships, and cash industries. And if we are actually filing for our S election, that's one of the different types that's actually audited the least. So if it's just a sole proprietorship and we're making up to $25,000, we can see we're in the 1% bracket, 25,000 to about 100,000, a little under 2%, and then Schedule C, 100,000 plus, that's exceeding 2%. And I think the reason for that is because since we have this S election tool available to us where we can file with the IRS with this particular election, I think it would make sense that if you are making over $100,000 and you're not getting good tax advice and you're not filing for your S election, it's likely that there's other stuff you're doing wrong too. So it makes sense to me that the IRS is probably targeting those types of folks who aren't doing the good proactive tax planning, because if you don't have the advice, you're probably not taking the right kind of deductions or categorizing them correctly or whatever. So just another reason why maybe an S corporation could be a good fit for you, or maybe you and a buddy are taxed as a partnership, or whatever the case may be. I was talking about too, we get towards the end of the calendar year and we sit down with our accountant and we're like, hey, what are some other things that I can fund? Maybe I've made a ton of money this year and I want to put some of it aside. I'm not quite sure what would be the most tax advantaged vehicle to put that in. Something you can think about is a health savings account. Because as you guys know, if you're a small business owner, you don't always have the luxury that some of our W-2 salaried friends have at really big companies where all the benefits are paid for. So we don't necessarily always have someone covering our health insurance or our retirement. And a lot of the times we have to set those things up, not just for ourselves, but also for our, different employees and folks who are working for us. And by setting up a health savings account, we can ultimately contribute and deduct, for 2023 at $3,850 or $7,750 for your family. These HSAs, they grow tax-free. You can end up taking tax-free withdrawals for medical expenses. And two, if we think about incorporating the professional advice of a good financial advisor, we're really going to be in the best position possible throughout the lifetime of us owning the small business, building our career, building our company. Because if we have this vehicle and we can actually take it as a deduction for our taxes and also build up this tax deferred, wealth generation vehicle, it could be really helpful as we enter into old age. Maybe we needed little additional help. This is an entire savings account that if we don't use it regularly while we're young and healthy, we could tap that and access that later into our old age. Last things to think about are just, are you a small business owner and you have kids, and maybe your kids are actually old enough to work for you? Maybe we can start to employ them where they're under age 18, but they're actually old enough to do legitimate activities for us. For example, maybe that we're putting out flyers, we're advertising. Sometimes for my real estate agents, I say, can they go put the signs out or pull the signs back in or visit the property and check on it? Or, what are the different types of things that our kids can do that maybe aren't highly skilled activities, but we would otherwise potentially pay someone for that service. Because what we can do is we can employ them in our business, they earn income, and then we can actually contribute that to a Roth IRA and potentially other employee benefits that grow over time. So you make a deal with your kids and you say, hey, maybe we have you work and you get 60%, I get 40, I'm going to save 40 for you, something called a Roth IRA. You'll generate quite a bit of income and a lot of interest on that account, and it will be there for you when you're older for you to use as your retirement. Just very helpful for you because we're not going to be taxed on that income. We get to set it aside for our family and can really be advantageous, all around. Some of my clients do annual shareholder retreats where, maybe you want to take your family on a vacation, but you also really want to reward your team for an excellent year. Maybe they've done a great job with sales or, generated quite a bit of income for you. There are certain ways to take that as a deduction, and generally your CPA will help you figure out how best to document that. Sometimes too, these types of things are, what's in your risk tolerance. It is allowed, but we have to structure it the right way where we're not claiming that something happened that really didn't. A lot of the times we get around that is to actually have, minutes from our meetings. We sat and met about X, Y, and Z at these times. How is that documented as a legitimate expense? And then keeping in mind, generally we can't deduct everything for our kids or people who aren't involved in the company. Last thing to think about that I think is hugely advantageous is we talked about our health savings account. So we're getting older. We really need to start putting money away in this health savings account, but also we are getting older and we want to retire. Maybe we can't always do a really heavy labor intensive profession forever. And maybe that is predominantly what our business is about. A solo 401k is a great opportunity if you're interested in saving for retirement. What it is it's a 401k you set up for your small business. You can contribute to it, so up to $66,000 if you're under age 50. Sometimes too, you can take certain amounts as your employer contribution and other amounts as your employee contribution. So just a good way to end up contributing quite a bit more to a retirement account that you are not actually contributing to, that you're able to take as a deduction on your taxes. So also, sometimes too, we might max out of a traditional IRA or maybe the Roth. It's too low for the limit for us. So a solo 401k lets us put in quite a bit of money, particularly in those years where we're just doing better than others. And we talked about the financial advisor. I think the financial advisor can sit down with you and say, hey, I understand you're a small business owner. It's sometimes going to be feast or famine. What can we set aside each month to really help you achieve your goals over your lifetime? Because as we said, we don't necessarily have that safety net that some of our friends and family might have working for a bigger company. Without the benefits, it's just, you don't always have the security. And unless you do some good budgeting and planning for that, you might have years where, for whatever reason, the economy isn't in your favor. We all know a lot of small business owners who got wiped out during COVID. Large world events and natural disasters can happen. But if we set aside good savings and we're doing good tax planning, hopefully we can prevent some of those worst case scenarios. So the last thing I'll say is just, give you a plug for using an attorney. Obviously, you can get specific legal advice. We talked about privacy, where I can serve as your registered agent. Sometimes, just when you click through on an online service provider like LegalZoom or any other, Rocket Lawyer, I can't think of all the different ones, but why it's cheaper is because you are not getting the value of specific advice for you. You don't have an attorney in your state who's looking at all of your facts, getting to hear exactly what you're passionate about, what matters to you. And I think that, that's really where attorneys provide value. I know we are expensive, but it's also really expensive to not know what you're doing and make a mistake and have to pay for it on the back end. So we also, you have to file with the Secretary of State. We try and include that in a flat fee rate for you. We can file the annual report for you if you'd like that as part of your annual service. Then, you won't be administratively dissolved for not, filing each year with the Secretary of State in April like you're supposed to. Finally, you'll know that your filing will be correct, so you don't have to pay to amend the filing later. We get a lot of clients who sometimes want to form particularly asset protection LLCs in other states. That's something where you can get in trouble, where just on the back end, we can't always fix what you've done in another state because I'm not licensed there. So knowing that your filing is correct, you haven't disclosed stuff that you didn't want to put out on public record. Also, I had a LegalZoom, might not have been LegalZoom. It's definitely an online service provider who prepared a document in the last few years, and it referenced the wrong legal statute. Our laws and statutes change every year, so they might not change with respect to what we're particularly working on. But that is a risk you run where, we're using this national industry service provider. If they don't have things updated, that will directly impact what it spits out for me as the pre-populated template or document. So thinking about that too, it's our job to know what the law is, obviously advise on that law and keep you up to date. And two, if you did a bunch of planning and you have all your paperwork and maybe it's 5 to 10 years old, it's a good idea to talk to an attorney to see if you need anything updated. Particularly if you and your business partner put together something a decade ago, maybe it had some components that were handshake agreements, is what I call them, where maybe not everything is documented in writing, but the idea is we're going to cover for each other's families if something goes wrong. Do a lot of probate, which is when you die, we have to figure out your assets. And the most expensive probate is when I have small business owners who did not plan ahead. Because if you pass away and we didn't have all this stuff set up the right way at the outset, then it costs a significant amount of legal fees to unwind what happened and figure out how to appropriately compensate all of the interested parties. This is me. This is my email address and our phone number. So feel free to shoot me an email today if you have any questions about your specific situation. I have an associate named Hayden. He helps me in a lot of the estate and business planning. So if you reach out, I might be able to work on your file. He might work on your file. Kind of just depends on our caseload, but both of us are experienced. We also do other stuff here like wills, powers of attorney, guardianships, partitions, talk about probate, trust, business planning, planning for your family for, not just the business or the estate, but everything all together, thinking about it for generations to come. Form LLCs, and we can help you with your commercial real estate purchase for your business as well. But thank you all for having me. I'd love to open it up for questions. I am going to get my marketing person, Riley, to help me with the sound, because I think I told you guys you can hear me, but I can't hear you. So I'll open it up for questions. I'm going to look in the chat. I will tell you, really great at the law, but not great at the technology. So does anybody have any questions that they want to ask or anything anybody wants to hear more about?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
I can. Yep.
Oh, great. This is lovely. Thanks for all of your information. So I have a question in regards to setting up an LLC with a trust. Do you have the member of the LLC act as the trust, or how do you set that up with living trusts in existence?
Yeah, absolutely. So generally what I do is I have the trust as the overarching umbrella. So the trust is the main entity.
Okay.
So you're creating the trust while you're alive. Then I take any rental properties you might own, any small businesses you have, and we talk about setting up LLCs to make sure that they're properly formed, properly funded.
Right.
And then what I do is I actually assign the LLCs into the name of the trust.
Okay.
So the trust is the member, the trustee is the member. So trust is the main vehicle, and then everything else is underneath of that.
Okay.
So it's a really cool strategy.
That's great. Okay, so just to say it back, so the trustee is the member of the LLC typically to keep that connection.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hi, Elizabeth. This is Steve.
Hey there. How are you?
Good. I have a questions about tax benefits. If I use an LLC to make purchase such as a computer or printer for the business, will I be able to get the tax benefits?
It's usually more of a question for your CPA, but yes, this could be counted as business assets. You guys might want to talk about, we'll register all of those as equipment, what makes sense for your business, how much do they cost? Yeah, usually I would talk to your CPA, certainly to purchase those assets and then maybe start taking depreciation on them over time. But I think a good question for your CPA, generally, yes, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, if y'all don't have any other questions, I'm just gonna have my email here. We'll try and send that out. I believe this was recorded, so I think you guys might be able to access it again later if you need it. But I'm always happy to help. And like I said, we do complimentary phone consultations. So feel free to reach out and just,